for the fine introduction. Welcome everyone to the webinar entitled KPI Documentation, Understanding KPI Names, Calculating Formulas, and Establishing Targets. So for the next 45 minutes, I will we'll go together into a journey on getting more insights on how we can work correctly with KPIs, on how we can establish calculating formulas and targets accordingly. Now, because Ali made such a fine introduction about myself, I'm going to skip all these slides together, and we'll just continue directly with the agenda of the day and the main objectives I proposed to accomplish today. So for the beginning, we'll start with a short introduction to what KPIs are, and we'll continue afterwards with describing the KPI documentation form functions and the KPI documentation form design. Then we'll have a look into the standards for naming KPIs, as this is one of the major setbacks for many companies. And we'll look also into how we can calculate and standardize the calculation formulas. And we'll finish with approaches to target setting and behaviors attached to target setting. Now, as the main objectives of this session, I've proposed to provide advice on the rigorous approach to establish and use KPIs, to understand the key functions of the KPI documentation template. I will give some insights on how to correctly select targets for KPIs and eventually to address negative behaviors connected to target setting. Let's start the session with a short introduction on KPIs, and we'll discuss the value added by KPIs, the KPI definition as formulated by the KPI Institute, the KPI typology, and the KPI lifecycle. Afterwards, we'll continue with the main discussion based on the KPI documentation process and its implications. In terms of the KPIs, now, one of the most important questions that is posed in all the training courses that I have facilitated is, okay, what is the importance of the KPI? What is the value added by KPIs? And by aggregating the responses received from all these sessions, I've managed to cluster them into three categories. First-hand KPIs provide us with clarity because we can have a very good insight on the data, on what data should be measured in terms of evaluating organizational performance. It helps us identifying underperforming business areas, and furthermore, it allows us to know more about where we are and have a clear picture of our situation at a certain point in time. In the same time, it allows us more focus because we can look at underperforming areas. We can see what are the KPIs on red, and in turn it will allow us to take improvement actions. Certainly, it facilitates better communication and alignment and synergy between departments. Also, it facilitates control because we can better manage different areas of the organization. But in the same time, it allows us improvement to happen throughout learning. So learning is an important component of the KPI management, and by measuring KPIs allows us to take this kind of improvement measures and to more efficiently and effectively improve performance of the organization, respectively achievement of objectives and defined strategies. Let's look now at the definition of what a KPI is. Now, this is a definition which we've developed as part of the KPI management framework developed by our institute. So, we define a KPI as a measurable expression for the achievement of a desired level of results in an area relevant to the evaluated entity's activity. Now, it might seem that this definition is a little bit not so specific, as it doesn't relate to a specific area of an organization. Why it's like this? Because the KPIs, as we've identified, can be used in multiple scenarios. We've identified over 18 scenarios in which KPIs can be used in relation with improving performance of an organization. So KPIs, for example, can be used for measuring the strategy, the achievement of the strategy of an organization, or even of a department or a specific support area of business. In the same time, we can measure KPIs in terms of supplier performance, in terms of individual performance, but also for aspects relating to audit or to productivity, quality improvement, well-being, and this even relates up to the personal level. So how we manage our finances, how we are performing in our sport activities, and these kind of related aspects. So KPIs can be used in a variety of scenarios. Now, in terms of using KPIs in practice, at this point it's quite a little of a confusion. Why? Because there's different terminologies that are used nowadays for expressing performance measurement activities. So different entities use different types of terminologies. What you have here in front of you is or are some sneak previews from different websites from around the world on different entities which are using different terminologies in relation with performance measurement. So for example, what you have in the center is a snapshot from the Jeddah municipality website, and here they are using KPIs as a terminology. But for example, on other websites, such as the Audit Commission in the UK, they are using a different terminology. They are using performance indicators. Same happens in different institutions. As you might see on the slide you have in front of you, where, for example, the White House is a performance measures as terminology, New York City Hall indicators, Jeddah, as I already explained, key performance indicators or KPIs, and the government of Western Australia is using same key performance indicators. Now, because there is different terminologies used in practice and employed by different organizations, very important is to try to look at these KPI typologies and understand what are the best options to be used in everyday activities in terms of measuring performance. Now, there are several options, but two are maybe the ones which stand out. As you can see, there's a simpler option where we are using KPIs to evaluate performance, to evaluate whatever is important for us as an organization to measure, and metrics for all other measures that inform decisions but not necessarily have a direct impact on the performance of the organization. Another option, more elaborated option, so to say, a more complex option, is to look on different typologies of naming KPIs or measures as part of the performance measurement framework. So some organizations prefer to use performance indicators as for evaluating general performance, and then to look on KPIs as those specific 10-20 measures which look on the strategic performance of an organization. And then we have a more granular, granular level for key results areas or key result indicators. Usually here are clusters of 5 to 6 indicators which capture the essence of an organizational strategy. Now, from these two options, what I prefer is a more simpler approach towards working with KPIs, and this is to use KPIs for whatever we are looking in terms of measuring performance, and all the others we should treat them as metrics. What is important is that you don't have to take the solution for granted by to decide on which of the options you decide to use in an organizational context. You can look at them like to a restaurant menu, where you can pick according to your organizational context the terminology that you want to use. Why I prefer to use a simpler terminology is that while you are progressing and increasing your performance maturity capability, then you have the chance to elaborate on the more clear and simpler option, and you can add up different terminologies. However, in terms of using a more complex structure, it's on the stakeholders' in a way obligation to try to explain what is the value added of using such a complex structure. So preferred is to use KPIs for evaluating performance metrics to inform decisions. Now, if you are looking on identifying KPIs, let's see. One of the major issues of organization is that they are using in terms of KPIs different definition, different contexts. So it's important to understand what are the KPIs and what are not KPIs, and actually other tools. So employee satisfaction, for example, is definitely an important key performance indicator, and it's a popular one used by many organizations. Same happens with employee engagement nowadays. So employee satisfaction is definitely a key performance indicator. Turnover, it's another key performance indicator, and here it relates to sales revenue, which how we know that it relates to sales revenue, because as you can see, it has attached a symbol, the money value, the dollar value. If instead of the dollar value we would have had the sign of a number, then we would have looked at this measure as employee turnover, and we'll see what if the employee turnover is a metric of KPI a little bit below. Finalize projects by 31st December. This is not a KPI, though in many contexts I have seen this expressed as a KPI. Basically what it is, it's a milestone, part of a project. Next, clients from resellers. This is a KPI related to the customer perspective of a balanced scorecard. However, in terms of number of employees, here we can have a discussion if it is or if it's not a KPI. Generally, number of employees is not a KPI. It's a metric, it's a statistic. But in certain contexts, we need to be aware that it can be transformed into a key performance indicator. For example, such contexts can be situations in which the company, for example, just pursues policy of growth. They are expanding and they need to employ more people. So in this kind of context, number of employees can become an important KPI. You are at a current level of 1,000 KPI, you want to grow to 2,000 KPI. For a specific period of time, the number of employees might become an important key performance indicator that you want to follow in this context. Samely, it happens when organizations are laying off personnel. It happened with Citibank 1 year ago. They laid off 10,000 people, so in employees. So in this context, number of employees became an important KPI for them. Let's go further on. Projects on time, on budget, and on budget. This, again, it's a KPI related to internal processes, and it's a KPI measured by many organizations. Now you can have different variations of this KPI. You can look only on percentage projects on time, or percentage projects on budget, or percentage projects according with specifications. All these are important KPIs as long as they are evaluating the performance in a certain area of your organization. Let's look at quality. Now, quality definitely is not a KPI. As we can see, it doesn't have any symbol in front, and we'll discuss about the importance of establishing symbols a little bit later on. What it is, it's a value driver. Yes, it's says something about the values that you are relating to in relation with certain aspects of your business. Number of defects. This is an important KPI, especially for the manufacturing industry, where we are looking at Lean Six Sigma projects. So number of defects, it's a KPI commonly used by such organizations. However, if we are now looking on the budget, as it is expressed now, budget is not a KPI. The fact that an organization, let's say for example, allocates a certain budget to the marketing department, to the HR department, this doesn't say anything about the performance of that department. How we could transform this into a KPI is by looking at budget variance. Now, budget variance says something about how that department might manage the budget that was allocated to it. So in this context, budget variance becomes an important KPI for measuring the financial performance of a certain department, or even it can be elevated to the organizational level for measuring performance at the organizational level. Last one, increased market share to 28%. It's not a KPI. What it is, it's an objective. How we like to express objectives is by inserting in front of the expression an action verb. Increase, deploy, decrease, manage, improve, and so on. Many times I've came across examples of KPIs which start with this kind of action verbs. Increase, decrease the number of complaints, increase the number of I don't know, of new clients, increase satisfaction of employees, or the customer satisfaction. Why it's not okay to use increase or decrease in the naming of the KPI is because this should relate to an analysis that you perform in terms of how you are standing for a particular KPI. You will look at the targets, you look at the current state, you look at the desired state, what is the target that you want to achieve, and then you can make to your superiors or to the shareholders a comment. You can analyze the KPI and explain if this KPI is increasing or this KPI according with the values analyzed and collected is decreasing. Now, the last thing I want to discuss in terms of working with KPIs and having a general overview of the importance of the KPIs and working correctly with KPIs is looking on the KPI lifecycle. What we have here are the main 3 stages of a KPI implementation project, of a KPI rollout project. And what you have on the columns are the main phases of such a KPI implementation project. Now, in this webinar is part of a larger series of webinars that the KPI Institute is organizing in partnership with MAL this year. In the first webinar, we've discussed about the importance of working with KPI and about lead identification, value added. We've tried to understand more about the KPIs. While in the second webinar, we've looked at the KPI selection process, which is one of the major challenges for companies in terms of working with KPIs. Now, once we've identified what are our needs and once we've selected the KPIs, a major step towards implementing a KPI framework and activating the KPI framework is documenting the KPIs. So the KPI documentation process is a vital process, part of the major pillars of the KPI management framework as designed by the KPI Institute. Of course, after we document the KPIs, another important phases would be the activation, collecting the data, reporting, and doing the analysis for the results. We should, and based on this analysis, we'll need to take decisions to communicate the decisions and the actions that we've decided we need to take to the key stakeholders involved in the process, and if possible even to a larger pool of employees. And of course we need to refresh the documentation, we need to refresh the KPIs once in a while for keeping everything on track. Now, as the main focus of this session is the KPI documentation process and how we should correctly establish calculating formulas and targets, this is what we are going to discuss in the next modules of this webinar. So, let's look at the KPI documentation form functions, and afterwards we'll look at the design of such a template. Why it's important to have a KPI documentation form? Now, on one hand, having a KPI documentation form allows us a better understanding of KPIs by providing clarity and meaning to KPI names. So here we are talking about standardizing KPIs, and not only in terms of names, but also in terms of the sections, of the section that describes and informs a KPI, as we'll see in the next slides. Samely, a KPI documentation form can be an activation prerequisite. We can print the template and we can go to the KPI owners and data custodians and we can give them a standardized form from which they can collect the data for those KPIs that we are looking into. Samely, it can be an automation enabler because we can go with the specifications which were structured on these KPI documentation templates, and we can ask for input in terms of data to the IT department or the people entitled to collect the data from different systems connected to the performance framework. It can also act as a knowledge enabler for knowledge management. For example, we came across organizations which have a database of over 2,000 KPIs, and that's a very good resource for being aware of what is measured in an organization, not only at the current stage but also historically. It can be also it can have as an important function the one to educate stakeholders, not only KPI owners and data custodians, which can better understand the importance of a certain KPI, and by doing this they can better collect the data, and they can better streamline the processes for the collection and improving the KPI target meeting in terms of the KPI owners. But for example, if we have a new employee which is joining a team, for example, the strategy management office team, also other teams which are entitled to work with the KPI and manage the performance frameworks, then it can have on a glimpse an informed overview of certain KPIs that are used by the organization. Samely can be used as a buy-in for all stakeholders in terms of having a better understanding of what should be measured, what is the calculation formula, what is the purpose for measuring these KPIs. So, in terms of this, what you have in front of you is a KPI documentation template as designed on our platform, smartkpis.com, which consolidates over 20,000 KPI examples from different functional areas and industries, but also different contexts, organizational context, macroeconomic context, or individual context. We'll go through all these sections, but as you can see, it's quite an elaborated form with more than 40 fields, from the name of the KPI to the KPI definition, calculating formulas, trend, purpose, balanced scorecard perspective. It is the case. We can look at the limitation in terms of data collection, benchmarking fit, threshold examples, so target setting, which is a very important part of working with KPIs, and analysis and comments part, which is a very important part of the KPI documentation form. As conclusion to what I said until now, what it allows a KPI documentation form, it allows answering to questions such as what, why, and how in terms of working with KPIs. Now, there are quite a lot of fields that can be documented and included in a design of a KPI documentation form. What, in our example, developed in the last years, we've inserted more than 40 fields. Now, you need to take this as a menu, a restaurant menu, where you can pick up what are the main fields that you are interested in and you want to customize for your organization's specific context. The main fields in a KPI documentation form usually is the name of the KPI, which needs to be correctly inputted, and we'll talk more about standardizing the names of the KPIs. But important fields of KPI documentation form are the definition, the calculation formula and the sub-measures of the calculation formula, the purpose of the KPI, the targets, the profile in terms of owner, data custodians, sources, and the comment section, where we are inputting all the comments relating to a KPI as they came out as a result of the review meetings that are taking place with a frequency decided by the organization. We can talk about the frequency of 1 month or a quarterly frequency, but usually it is indicated to have a measurement frequency of or a monthly measurement frequency or quarterly frequency. Now, going back, what I will go through next is a few examples of such KPI documentation forms that partially informed our own design. So, for example, we have here a documentation form from a healthcare institution, and you can see that we have the name of the KPI, we have a coding of the KPI, and the objective that is measuring, the calculation formula, targets, even a graph is inserted into the KPI documentation form, the main benefits of measuring performance for this KPI, underlying leading practices, and lessons learned, and so on. Another documentation form is from the Federal Aviation Administration in the US, and samely this KPI is documented on 2 pages, same documentation, fields, definition, benefits, source of data, trend analysis. We have even a historical overview of performance related to this KPI. And this is a more simplistic form from Canada Revenue Agency, and we have one, I think, from Saudi Arabia, from the Electricity and Cogeneration Regulatory Authority. Now, here we have some good and bad practices. On one hand, each KPI is receiving a code, so we can see here G1, G2, up to G7, and they have even more KPIs with this coding. On the other hand, the definitions are not quite clear. So some of them resemble with some calculation formulas, some of them are resemble with the name of a KPI, actually not with a description of that KPI, such we have here. But another issue that I can spot it here is that there is no standardization across all these measures and definitions. So there is not any standard in terms of how we are defining these KPIs, how we are calculating these KPIs, how we are expressing targets for these KPIs. Now, in terms of the KPI documentation process, and in terms of trying to resume this, what is important is to make your research, to look at the internal literature, to look at these external resources in terms of reviewing them. It's important to make consultations with the key stakeholders, data custodians, KPI owners, and once you've documented a KPI, the next step will be to present the KPI to the owner, to the person who is responsible for reaching the targets for that specific KPI, and get approval. Similarly, it's important to have a sign-off for the KPIs from other important key stakeholders involved in the performance measurement process, such as the KPI architect, the person who overviews the entire performance management system. Here it can be the strategy manager or performance manager or another senior manager who is responsible for the KPI architecture. Once you have approval from the management team and you sign off the KPI documentation process, the next step is to consolidate all these KPIs in a KPI library. Now, having a KPI library has multiple benefits, among which it allows to have a standardized framework that eliminates risk of human error, and on the other hand, it sustains and promotes the performance culture within the company. Research data from Aberdeen Group mentioned that top performers are 53 more likely than the industry average to maintain a library of KPI examples. So maintaining such a library of KPI example, a consistent KPI library, it's of strategic. It might be of strategic importance for the organization in terms of communication, in terms of clarity, in terms of focus. Let's look now briefly at some standards that the KPI Institute is promoting in terms of naming KPIs. And in terms of this, it is very important to start each KPI with a symbol. As you can see here, we have dollar value, yes, for everything which relates to financial KPIs. Sales revenue, we can have profit, we can have expenditures, and so on. Everything which relates to a number, a ratio, we should translate using this type of symbol, the DS symbol. So how we translate this symbol is number of, and the KPI will be number of defects. For percentages, we'll use the symbol which resembles the percentage, and the way we are going to express this KPI is percentage of processes optimized. Now, why it's important to use these symbols? It's important because it allows you to have a shorter name of the KPI, a more clear name of the KPI. It's no use to use such expressions such as number of, value of, percentage of, because it doesn't add any value. While having short names, clear names, concise names for these KPIs, this will allow in turn a better communication and a better understanding throughout the organization in terms of what do you mean by these KPIs. If you are interested in providing more details, for this you have the KPI documentation form, and this is one of the major benefits and functions of the KPI documentation form. You have the short name of the KPI, but you have all those fields selected by you, which informs your KPI, informs your KPI names. Now, in terms of terminology standards, we are promoting the use of symbols for KPIs, and the second thing that we are promoting is the use of capital letters in front of each KPI name, which again reinforces the standardization in terms of naming KPIs. What we prefer to use for objectives is to start the objectives with action words: maintain, improve, enhance, and so on. I've already gave you a few examples about this. And initiatives should start with an adjective or a noun. So by doing this, we'll have a differentiation between different tools that are part of the management framework. Objectives start with verbs, KPI with symbols, and this is the major part we are discussing today, and initiatives which we should start with nouns or adjectives. Now, going further, this is a sneak preview on this slide. What you can see, it's a sneak preview of an exercise that I've been doing with one of the KPI Institute clients during a workshop. So what we have on the left side column, we have KPIs as proposed, originally proposed by the participants to the workshop. On the right side hand column, we have the KPIs which were adjusted according with the KPI Institute standards. So, as you can see just from a brief review, we can see that they are standardized, that they look better, that they can be easier understood and communicated. So it's not worth of using off, it's not worth of using words that don't add any value to working with KPIs. Same, we have here two KPIs which have included in their names the target. Now, the target, yes, on one hand you can include the target as part of the KPI name or even the objective name, but it will be better if you can include this target as part of the KPI documentation form. Keep the KPI name simple and then use the target section to establish what are your targets, what are your thresholds, and we'll discuss about this in the upcoming slides. We've discussed about the KPI naming. Now, what I want to discuss is about the calculating formulas, and for the next few slides we'll look in the KPI calculating formulas typologies. Now, there are different types of formulas that we are using for measuring and calculating our KPIs. We can have volume, we can have ratio, we can have the rate, average, indexes, compositions. These are usually the most popular KPI calculation formulas typologies that we have encountered and we came across in our organization. However, we can have exceptions for the rule. We can have very specific calculation formulas, but usually those relate to very specific KPIs, such as Net Promoter Score, or we might have other KPIs which are very particular to a specific industry. Now, while calculating KPIs is not important only to have the calculation formulas, but it's important to have standardized calculation formulas and to have the subordinate measures for these calculation formulas. As you can see here, I have three examples of KPIs, which we have the name, for which we have the name. In a separate column, we have the subordinate measure and then the calculation formula. How we are using and how we standardize these calculation formulas is by using the letters A, B, C, D. Usually A and B are the most commonly used as part of the calculation formulas. What's important is to inform what A stands for, what B stands for, so we have a clear overview of what we are measuring. In terms of the Berry ratio, A is the gross profit, B is the operating expense, the calculation formula is A over B. Same with the other measures. Now, what we have here is some sneak previews, some zoom-ins in the sections from the KPI documentation template which relate particularly with the calculation formulas. So here you can see not only the subordinate measures but also and calculation formulas, but you can see also the formula type and you can view the trend. In terms of the trend, we'll discuss more about this on the last section of this webinar, where we'll present different aspects relating to target setting, and we'll see that the trends can increase. We can have KPIs with trends good when increasing, when decreasing, or when within a range. So if we look on these KPIs, we can see that there is a standardization in terms of how our KPIs calculated, how KPI calculation formulas are designed and structured. So it's important to have this kind of standardization across all types of KPIs. Why it's important to have calculation formulas, why it's important to have sub-measures clearly identified, because a KPI, same KPI might be measured differently by different departments. So different departments might use different calculation formulas. For one example could be employee satisfaction or employee engagement. Usually this is an index, and this index can be informed by 1 up to 150 questions. So I've encountered surveys with 1 question. Similarly, I reviewed surveys with 150 questions. So it's important to have a standardization across how a KPI is calculated, and having this kind of sections inserted in the KPI documentation form, having the KPI documentation form consolidated in a KPI library allows us to have a unique way on how we are calculating, on how we are measuring performance for a certain KPI across the entire organization. Now, we might have same KPI might be used by different departments, and we might have different commentaries or different personalizations that might be applied to KPIs. But these are particularities that can be documented specific to each department. The last thing that I want to discuss today is about approaches to target setting. And the main aspects that I'll present will be the KPI target setting reference sources. Then we'll discuss about target setting process and challenges in working with KPI targets as part of the target setting approach. Now, why it's important to set KPI targets? If we don't have targets, we won't be able to make improvement to happen. We won't be able to see what is our current state and to try to diminish the gap between the current state and the desired state expressed by the target that we want to reach. So most of the KPIs should have targets clearly established. This in turn allows us to impact the behavior, which allows us to make improvement to happen. As main target setting reference sources, we can establish target by doing an internal benchmarking as a technique used for establishing targets. We might have certain KPIs on which we can look on different departments, see what data were recorded for that specific KPI, and then we can benchmark it with the data from these departments. For example, employee engagement can be a KPI which can be benchmarked internally benchmarked for each department. Same, we can look at external benchmarking in terms of comparing our organizational performance with other entities' performance in specific areas of interest. Another way of setting targets is analyzing the external environment and the market trends. Now, for example, we might have established a certain level of target during the current year, but that level of target might not be applicable for the next year. We can have situations in which the market, for example, is growing on, or which in in which case usually we are increasing the target. But in the same time we might have situation in which we have a recession, same as it happens a few years ago, and it's still happening in some markets even now. So in these cases we might want to keep the level of targets as established previously, or we might even want to diminish the level of targets established in order to try to reach them. Another way to look on the targets is to have a drill down approach. This means that you will drill down starting from the financial perspective of strategy map and drilling down up to the learning perspective of strategy map. For example, you need to look on what is your level of profitability and revenue that you want to achieve. These usually are data available for companies, and then you will need to drill down and looking on how do you want to reach these targets. Do you want, in terms of the customer perspective, do you want to look on attracting new customers, or do you want to make more sales for the same customer, to make some cross sales? Do you want to spend on selling new products, or you want to capitalize on selling the same products? Then you want to have a look on what's the impact of customer satisfaction on the sales volume and cross sales volumes. And here you can make some analysis, some statistics, and some forecastings in terms of what is the impact. For example, if the customer engagement or customer satisfaction is increasing from 60% to 70% in a year, and samely we had in the same year the number of products that were sold per individual grew from 3.2 products to 3.7 products, then we can make some analysis in terms of what will happen for the next year if, for example, the customer satisfaction will increase even more from 70% to 80%. How many products in average will sell, and how this increase will be. Same, we'll need to look at how what data we'll need to input for KPIs at lower levels, at internal processes level, in terms of how long it will take to make these sales, time to delivery, and in terms of how many hours of training do we need to facilitate to our employees, employee engagement level, employee satisfaction, and so on. Another type of target is the historical we can look at the historical records in terms of setting targets. So we already have the targets. We just look what is the trend, the historical trend, and we can set a target. Or another way we can have we can start a target. We have KPIs, might have KPIs which don't have any data. Usually when you start an implementation of a KPI framework, 20 to 30% of the KPIs don't have data. So in terms of these KPIs, we need to establish, to come up with targets from thin air, and we need to set targets from thin air. So usually how companies are doing this, they are starting the strategic planning process at the middle of June, July, especially for the companies who are starting the new financial year in January. Up to October, they are establishing the year performance management framework, establishing KPIs and targets, and then from October to December, they are testing the targets set for the KPIs for which no historical records were available. So by January, they will have some targets that were already established, were already tested, and then they can be activated and analyzed. Here we have a case study which resembles the context in which we need to analyze the external environment. We had a target established for 2011 at the level of 1 for total recordable case frequency. what happened because of some changes in the market conditions. The target couldn't be reached, and we actually it was overcome with or it doubled. So it actually the target which was 1.92. What happened for the 2012? They diminished the target to 135, so it could be easily be reached, and also it would have allowed the company to make the adjustments accordingly and reach this target and allow improvement to happen. Okay, in terms of target setting process, this should be done both top-down and but also horizontally. So we should look also at the drilling down throughout the organization, but also we need to look at horizontally at the same department level, consult with staff, consult with management, and calibrate vertically and horizontally how we are going to establish these targets. Very important, don't try to link the targets immediately to financial rewards. Financial rewards should be managed in conjunction with the benefits and rewards policies established by the HR, shouldn't be part of the performance management systems, though nowadays it often happens in many organizational contexts. Once we have established the targets, we can review them and we can activate the KPIs. Now, in terms of expectation from targets, we have. If we have KPIs for which we have historical records, which we are measuring for a long time, these are more reliable KPIs in terms of how we are analyzing the targets. On the other hand, for KPIs for which we don't have data, or KPIs for which targets which were established to a higher level due to the certain changes that are taking place in the organizational context, these are not targets such reliable as the ones for which we have a history, and we need to be attentive on the quality of data and how we are going to adjust such targets. In terms of targets, we have 3 types of targets that we can or several types of targets that can be employed. The most popular one is the one where we have a buffer level between what is on red and what is on green. So this will allow improvement to happen. This is the most popular type of threshold that is established, where we have a green area for targets which are going further the level established. We have a buffer level, and then we have a level where what is below this level, it's negative performance of the organization in terms of the specificalities of what is measured. Now, in terms of the trend, we have KPIs where trend is good when increasing, decreasing, and within range. KPIs with trend good when increasing is this one, employee satisfaction. We can have profitability, revenues, employee satisfaction at the learning employee and learning level of the balanced scorecard. Then we can have projects on time and budget at internal processes level, and we can have customer satisfaction, customer net promoter score at customer level. In terms of KPIs, we trend good when decreasing. One KPI is on time delivery, number of complaints, expenditure, costs. These are some KPIs on different balanced scorecard perspective. We trend good when decreasing. And there are certain KPIs with trends good when within range, and here we can discuss about budget variance, but also employee turnover. We don't want to have as a trend for employee turnover when increasing or decreasing, because we do want to keep a balance. We do want to have a certain number of employees with fresh knowledge that are entering the organization. In the same time, we need to make to complete the life cycle, and we need to to refresh or fresh up the personnel that we are using. Good. Now, last thing that I want to discuss, and with this I'm going to finish. It's now about 1 hour from the start of the webinar. Targets and setting targets, it's some behavior linked with how people are interpreting this, and we have certain types of behaviors that are linked with target setting. And here we are talking about gaming, about sandbagging, about unethical or tunnel behavior. What these are all about, sandbagging is when you are establishing lower targets than the realistic level, estimated as possible, and this is usually happening for sales persons, sales personnel. Tunnel behavior is when you are looking after the achievement of own targets without consideration of the implication for the other areas in the organization. That's why it's important to have an integrated performance management system, so you can see what are the interdependencies between establishing different KPIs and targets for these KPIs. Unethical behavior is about disregarding environmental and safety consideration in the process of meeting targets, and gaming is related to influencing results from unapproved means to ensure target achievement. As some case studies of this, I have several which inform this type of behaviors related to target setting. Many of them are from the hospital or from the healthcare industry. We have here titles, targets can kill. For example, some hospitals try to bypass or didn't try to bypass the procedures for the ambulance procedures established for the emergency department, so they still received patients though they were at full capacity. So it happened that those patients, some of those patients died. Why this happened? Because the government established some specific level of targets for ambulance bypass. In this particular case, the bypass should be less than 3% on each year level. What was linked to this bypass was compensation and rewards scheme. So while they looked for reaching the targets established by the government, on the other hand, they didn't took in consideration the implication for patients. And here the comments are quite clear in this animation. We can provide you with a doctor, but we can't doctor the numbers. So it's about having on one hand a tunnel behavior, on the other hand it's about gaming, and it happened in the case of the Royal Melbourne Hospital, where they were manipulated. They were manipulating the surgery waiting list and so on. Same it happened with Atlanta Public School. They were rewarded for the performance of their students. What the teachers started to do is to try to improve the marks, to adjust the marks that students were receiving to their national tests. And finally, I would like to conclude with a case study from Fort Pinto. There is a very no case study here. What they did, they had certain KPIs and targets established for assembling a new car. They tried to stick to these KPIs and targets. What happened? They didn't have time to run the tests, the safety test, and to take improvement actions based on this test. So they just released the car as it was, though from 31 collision tests, only 3 were successful. What happened? 500 fatalities were registered in the upcoming 9 years. The company was successful, it met its targets, but this came at a cost. And we need to be aware, and we need to be responsible on what are the impacts of these KPIs and target setting. Sometimes it's good enough to try to reach a certain level, even if we didn't get to the level established. We should still be rewarded or at least not be punished for not reaching it. So in terms of establishing targets, we need to be very specific, we need to be very attentive, and because it might negatively influence third parties. As a conclusion, what we've looked on today, we look on KPIs and value added by KPIs, clarity, focus, and alignment. We've discussed about the KPI typology and the KPI lifecycle, the importance of the KPI documentation form and the documentation form design. Then we've looked at some insights in terms of standards in KPI naming and calculating formulas. And finally, we've overviewed the target setting process and what is the influence on human behavior. With this, I would like to thank you for the interest in joining me and listening the insights I've had to say in terms of this specific subject, the KPI documentation. And now I would like to pass the mic to Ali for facilitating the Q&A session.
Well, thank you very much, Adrian. Folks, now we are open for the Q&A. Those who have the questions, they could either raise their hand. Once they raise their hand, I can unmute their microphone. They can speak directly to Adrian, or they could put their questions in the question box, and I'll be happy to read them over on your behalf. I see already a couple of hands raised and the questions are posted, so let me move directly. First one, Angela Gorau. Angela, can you hear us? Hello, Angela?
Hello. Hello.
Yes, Angela.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You raise your hand. Could you please introduce yourself and from where you're calling and ask the question?
I'm coming from Romania. I am a consultant in management systems. And this domain, this specific area in KPIs are very familiar to me, because we are many time have the many time we have the opportunity to discuss with our clients about KPIs.
So, Angel, what is your question?
Sorry?
I'm sorry. Can you just ask the question? I'm sorry. I'm just pushing you because we have a number of other questions.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay. I want to ask what is the difference in the about Mr. Brudan between objects and KPIs, very specific.
Okay, thank you, Angela, for the question. Now, that's an aspect that I'm often come across during the workshops that I'm conducting. One of the major challenges for professionals is to make a clear distinction between objectives and KPIs. Now, objectives usually translate the strategies of an organization or a specific department, while KPIs are the specific tools which are used to measure in how degree did we achieve a certain objective that was established. So KPIs need to be seen as tools which allows us in terms to try to oversee the achievement level of certain objectives for which these KPIs are monitored for. Now, this is in terms of the difference between objectives and KPIs in relation with a strategic performance management framework. KPIs can be also used individually, not only in conjunction with KPIs and initiatives, but can be used as part of KPI dashboard where we are looking at operational aspects of a certain organization, and here we have clusters of KPIs. I can give you an example. For example, an example from the HR. For the HR function, we can have a dashboard built and a cluster of KPIs for looking at retention, at talent development, at workforce dynamics, at this kind of particular functions of the HR.
Thank you very much. And one more question, if you can, about employee satisfaction. That
Yes.
this can be unobjective as much as KPIs.
Now, in terms of employee satisfaction, the way I will formulate the objective will be in terms of improving employee satisfaction or improving employee engagement. How I'm going to measure or enhancing. So I will add an action verb as part of expressing the objective. How I'm going to measure this objective, I'm going to measure through the KPI, percentage employee satisfaction or percentage employee engagement. This is usually an index, and as I already have emphasized, it can be a consolidation of several questions as part of a survey that is launched.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela, for your question. And once again, my apologies for pushing you to quickly ask the question. But let me move to another caller. We have Mr. Dr. Najib Azhar. Dr. Azhar, can you hear us? Could you please introduce yourself and ask the question, sir?
Yes, I can hear you well, and I guess you can hear me too now.
Yes, sir, we can.
I have a question. I actually have several questions, but I kind of link them all together. And you know, being of engineering background, and by the way, sorry, to introduce myself, I am a healthcare technology management consultant, to say the least. My question is that you mentioned dollar numbers and percentages. And in particular, you gave examples about what can be considered performance indicators. As a mathematician, and I would like you to comment about that, I feel more comfortable with indices or indexes as performance indicators. For example, if it is dollar value, I would, you know, we always tend to see dollar per revenue generated, per operating cost, and so on. Or even if it's number, like number of employees is not a KPI, so it's, let us say, number of employees that are satisfied, so as a percentage or as a ratio. Do you agree with that?
Now, there is and there will be a debate in terms of what is the best way of expressing KPIs and what symbols should we use. And we had more types of symbols and more types of or more typologies of KPIs in terms of naming and symbols that we've used, but in the end, the most popular ones are these. And the idea is to try to simplify the framework with which you are working and not try to complicate it. So that's why the most common ones used are the symbols for money value. The one for number, the DS one, is used both for a specific KPI for a number of employees, but it can be used also part of a ratio. For example, ratio of teachers to students or doctors to nurses. In the end, the result, the data is the number. So this is how we capture it. And percentage for what is the for rates usually is used. These are the most popular ones. Now that doesn't mean that organization cannot use other types of symbols or other ways of calculating KPIs. In terms of indexes, this is something that I don't really reinforce, because indexes is a composition or are compositions or more metrics or more values, and it might be very hard to benchmark. It might be very hard to standardize these kind of indexes and to try to improve the results in those indexes, because those indexes are informed by more factors, which in turn relate to more initiatives and more interdependencies that needs to be addressed. So by keeping KPIs simpler, it will be more easier to address improvement in terms of diminishing the gap between the current state and the desired state for specific KPIs.
I do agree with you. So like I said, I tend to be more comfortable with the indices, but I do agree that there are other KPIs that may not be indices or percentages. Just as an example, like medical device failures, instead of looking at the number of failures, we usually look at the mean time between failures, or the mean time to repair, or the mean time to failure, and so on. Just a quick follow-up question. When you initiate a KPI or envisage a KPI, does it happen that sometimes in a particular organization you may find out that what you thought would be a good key performance indicator does not turn out to be? How would you know that?
Now, usually this is something that is addressed by the key stakeholders, not specifically by us. I like to look at myself as a facilitator of a certain performance management process. But in terms of this, yes, it happens, and it happens frequently, that KPIs that were initially developed, yes, and activated, are not the ones that in a way capture the essence of what a specific manager wanted to measure, or a specific stakeholder wanted to measure throughout it. So in terms of this, some KPIs, once they are established, they are going throughout a review process, and if the case, they can be replaced or the targets can be adjusted. So in terms of KPIs, you can rephrase them in terms of the naming, you can readjust the targets, so it's looking about refreshing the KPIs. In the same time, you can supersede that KPI. If that KPI doesn't give you any useful information for your business, and it doesn't add any kind of value, then it's no use to keep on tracking it.
So,
did I answer your question?
Yes, you did, but I would also like to ask you, from your experience, roughly what percentage of KPIs you actually, end up discarding, and the others you're keeping? Is it like a very high percentage that is discarded, or very low percentage?
Now, ideally, we shouldn't discard a large percentage of KPIs, and this discarding of KPIs shouldn't be done with a very high frequency. Usually, KPIs are replaced, are overviewed, and more drastic actions are taken once a year. Now, during the year, ideally, you should have employed several stages, several points in time where you are reviewing your KPI framework. You'll have some performance review meetings in place. So during these meetings, you review the KPIs, and if it is needed, you can take the action to replace a KPI or to review the target. Usually this shouldn't be done with such a high frequency, and ideally you should have from the beginning a framework which resembles what your organization wants to achieve. So usually the number of KPIs that are superseded or discarded is not big. It shouldn't be big or large, but this also has to do or reflects the quality of the KPI implementation project that was put in place. Because if the needs are not clearly identified from the beginning, you might end up with a large number of KPIs which are not correctly established.
Okay, thank you.
I cannot give you a number, but usually it shouldn't be. If the process is correctly done, it shouldn't be large.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Azar, for your question. Let me move to the next caller. We have Brother Hamad Al-Tamimi. Brother Hamad, can you hear us? I think we have an echo. Let me just unmute him. I think you've also posted the question. The question posted by Brother Hamad is, can we use KPI as a tool of balanced scorecard?
Yes, definitely. KPIs are part of the balanced scorecard. Now, the balanced scorecard system developed starting from 1991 when was released throughout an article published in Harvard Business Review. At that point, it was just a scorecard with 4 perspectives. Now, the balanced scorecard developed in a system where we have a combination of the desired state of evolution, the strategy of the organization, the strategy map, which translates the strategy of the organization throughout objectives, the scorecard, the performance scorecard, which consolidates all the KPIs for which the achievement of the strategic objectives are measured, and we'll have also part of the balanced scorecard the portfolio of initiatives resembling all the initiatives that we are putting in place in order to reach our objectives. So definitely KPIs are important tools, part of the balanced scorecard assemble or system.
Let me move to next caller.
Other questions?
Yes, we have Sally Hosni. Can you hear us, Sally? Could you introduce yourself and ask the question?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Yes, please introduce yourself and ask the question.
Hello?
Yes, Sally, please go ahead.
Okay, this is Sally Hosni. This is Sally Hosni from Egypt.
Okay, hi, Sally.
Actually, I have 2 questions. Thank you very much for the great presentation.
Okay, thank you, Sally.
So, are you hearing me?
Yes, quite clear. So
okay, my first question. Okay, perfect. My first question is related to the previous question, actually, or maybe some clarification I need regarding the KPIs. Can we say that KPIs are a tool of a kind of performance management system in the organization? Because in organization we have a variety of performance management systems. So can we consider KPIs as a tool or a part of a performance management system, like the balanced scorecard or MBO management by objectives?
Yes, definitely. KPIs is one. We can consider KPIs as one of the main tools, part of a performance management system, such as the balanced scorecard. Mainly KPIs give up the essence of such a performance management system because it informs how we are performing and allows us to take corrective actions throughout the initiatives in order to reach our objectives. So in this particular case, KPIs, we can see them as staying what we have upstream of the KPIs are the objectives of KPIs, are informing the objectives of the organization upstream, and downstream the initiatives that are posed in order to reach the objectives set for the organization. So KPIs are important tools in this context and provide with the bridge between objectives and initiatives as part of the performance management, or if you want to call it a balanced scorecard structure.
Yes. Okay. For the second question, actually it's from my practical professional life. I'm an HR manager in a company, and we usually use the KPIs individually according to specific job description to each employee in the company. So from your point of view and your experience, can we change the KPIs for the employee while we didn't change the job description, while the job description is always the same, but can we review the KPIs each year and change it for each individual? As the KPIs for each individual, it's the tool on which we perform his, we evaluate his performance, and we took administrative decisions by the end of the year. So is it right, or is it okay to change KPIs while we didn't change the job description and the job description is the same?
Now, here we have to look at different aspects. If the KPIs developed resemble the job description for a certain position, definitely while changing the job description, the KPIs should also be reviewed. Not necessarily change, but we should review and see, okay, if the job description expectations are different, then the KPIs should be different. This is the case if the KPIs are aligned with specifically with the job description. Now, usually, in terms of individual performance management, the way the alignment should happen, it should be by looking from the strategic level and aligning it to department level and individual level. So the KPIs at the individual level should be aligned and should be reviewed in conjunction with any changes that are happening to KPIs upstream at team level or department level. Now, another aspect in terms of individual performance management is that for measuring performance at the individual level, we shouldn't look only at specific data measured throughout KPIs, but performance individual plans should be informed by three major pillars. On one hand, we have the KPIs. On the other hand, we have two other important pillars, which in the end are informed by the job description. And here I'm talking about competencies, and here maybe it's these competencies which are the hard tools of an individual performance plan resemble maybe more with the job description what an individual needs to be good at doing. Yes, for example, he needs to be good on project management, he needs to be good on working with Excel, working with IT files, and in the same time, while doing this, he needs to have certain types of behaviors. So behaviors are another pillar which needs to be evaluated in terms of individual performance plans and individual performance evaluations. Basically, we are looking at a triangulation of three main elements: KPIs, which should be cascaded directly from the organizational strategy department and so on, competencies, which look at the hard skills of an individual, and behaviors, which look at the soft skills of an individual, like leadership, the way it's behaving towards its colleagues, and so on. Because
yes, the teamwork. The teamwork,
exactly.
The negotiation skills, yes. Okay.
Yes, because all these impact the KPIs and the performance of the individual as objectively evaluated through KPIs.
Okay, and that means I cannot depend only on the KPIs. I should add the behavior part and the competencies part.
Yes. Why this? Because some individual might perform brilliantly, so he or she might reach all his targets. He or she might have brilliant results, but while doing this, they might have negative behavior towards their peers. So we don't want to do this, we don't want this to happen, because this negative behavior might impact the performance of colleagues or other employees.
Yes.
So that's why it's important to look at this triangulation.
I'm sorry, for example, if I have an employee who is attending every day late at work but achieving results, such behavior is not accepted, regardless the good results.
Yeah, it's not acceptable because by doing this, he might influence other colleagues' behaviors, which in turn might have an impact on medium term or longer term, or even short term.
Yes, yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the information and the good webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Bye-bye.
Ali, for your question.
Bye.
Now, Adrian, you tell me, I know we are running out of time, but we have one more caller who has raised a hand, and we have about 6 to 7 questions in the question box. Now, if you would like
to... let's try to answer some few more questions then.
Okay, let me try to unmute because we give preference to the callers. Mohammed Ajmal, sir, can you hear us? Could you introduce yourself and ask the question? Mohammed Ajmal. Okay, I guess let me unmute him and move to the question box. Oh, okay, the question box is also full now. How do I take all these questions? Let me try to... Okay, we have a question from Dima Chatila, who's a business development analyst at SETS Engineering Consultancy Company in Lebanon, Beirut. What are the most relevant KPIs for the engineering consultancy firms? I would be grateful if you could provide me with some references.
Most important KPIs for what industry?
For engineering consultancy.
For engineering consultancy. Okay, now yeah, that's a very specific questions in terms of KPIs. I don't specifically have the knowledge on this particular field, but how we can address this specific question is part of the smartkpis.com. We have a particular section dedicated to KPIs for professions. So I can send Mizima the link to that particular section where she can review some particular KPIs used or that might be used or useful for her specific industry.
Okay, let me move to another question from Brother Muhammad Faisal Al-Ghani. The question is, I'm curious on how to set the objectives of KPIs. As stated on the screen that we have to start with the verbs such as maintain, improve, etc. However, you mentioned earlier that objectives have to be achievable. Any comments on it?
So the question, I want to review it once again, was how we would establish objectives, specific objectives.
How?
Yes. Now,
especially in context of the verb, such as maintain, improve, etc.
Yes. Now, yes, there's different options on how you can phrase objectives. On one hand, you can use very specific objectives and short objectives, as we like to keep them: maintain or improve customer satisfaction, enhance delivery time, optimize processes. So very short objectives. We start with an action verb. On the other hand, we can use more elaborated objectives, which resemble the SMART objectives, where we have not only the action, but we have also other parts including as part of the objectives, like improve the satisfaction of employees with 20% by the end of the year, and this should be a part of the HR manager's responsibility. So we can have very complex objectives in terms of the way they are expressed. Now, these two options, either you are using a specific objective, a short objective, either you can use longer or more complex objectives. The way I can see the longer or complex objectives be decomposed is in a shorter objectives followed by the specific target, the owner of that specific objective, and the time frame for which the data is captured for that specific objective. Now, if we have a concise objective, all the other bits which inform a more complex one, the smart objectives, will go under the KPI documentation field, because we've discussed that in the KPI documentation field we will have sections dedicated to the definition, to the purpose, to the calculation formula, to the specific targets, to the owners and KPI data custodians, and to the frequency of KPI measurement. So hopefully that I answered the question, or I've clarified a little bit more of the way we can use objectives and terminology.
Okay, let me move to another question, quick one from Brother Mahmoud Al-Sharaf. The question is, do we have an international KPI for human resource performance as a department?
If we have an international KPI for human resource department,
human resource performance as a department, yes. Do we have any international KPIs?
Now, it depends on how you are defining international.
Okay, let me unmute him. He's just raised his hand.
We might have some popular KPIs that are used as part of measuring performance of a human resources department, such as employee engagement or employee satisfaction. Some of these KPIs can be benchmarked as long as the same type of surveys are kept. So there are different entities throughout the globe who are measuring, for example, employee engagement. The most popular one might be Gallup, but other organizations, international organizations, who are measuring and benchmarking or offer benchmarking data for employee engagement is Thomson Reuters or Hayes Group or other types or other organizations. There are quite a few. Now, it's very important to stick to the same standards of measuring specific KPIs in terms of benchmarking them at international level. But most popular are these. Actually, the one which is started to be used with a more higher frequency is employee engagement, because employee engagement impacts several performance outcomes at organizational level, such as employee turnover, such as innovation, such as productivity, such as absenteeism rates, well-being, customer satisfaction, and so on. So it's a KPI of very important relevance for organizations.
Thank you very much. Brother Sharaf, I hope it answers your question. I know you raised your hand, but sir, let us move to another caller because we have a number of questions left over. There's a question from Brother Adil Al-Mahbub. How do we know that our KPIs are so competitive? Short answers, Adrian.
If competitive in terms of what again? If they were established correctly and if they match the targets, then they should be competitive. If they add value to the organization, this means that they are competitive KPIs. Let's give you an example. Employee engagement, again, it showed up that organizations who are measuring this KPI and improving performance in this KPI are also improving performance in terms of productivity, in terms of increasing customer satisfaction. So here we are talking about added value by KPIs. Of course, how we are assuring that we are measuring the right KPIs, we need to, while setting KPIs, while selecting KPIs, we need to be sure that we are involving all key stakeholders in this process. So the shareholders, the senior management, middle management, employers, supplier, customers must be in a way interviewed, and their insights must be analyzed in terms of establishing the base KPI framework. Second thing that we need to do while having monthly or quarterly review meetings, we have 11 or opportunities. If it's monthly, we have 3 opportunities during the year. If it's quarterly, to review the KPI, to adjust the KPIs if we spot that some of them are not as competitive or don't resemble what we actually want to measure.
Okay, I think I can take just 2 more
Hopefully
questions.
I've answered the question.
I hope so, certainly. Let us move to another question from Dr. Muhammad Al-Anani, Egypt, Alexandria, who's a quality manager at Koki Americana Group. The question is, what is the difference between KPI and a KRA?
Okay, so what's the difference between key performance indicators and key risk indicators? Now, definitely, while KPIs look at organizational performance, key risk indicators look at potential risks that might impact the performance of an organization. So in terms of this, we are measuring key risk indicators in order to try to mitigate the risks that might occur and influence the achievement of objectives and reaching the targets on our key performance indicators. So there's an interconnection between KPIs and KRIs. Both data from KPIs and KRIs can be analyzed as part of a predictive analytics approach towards looking at the data, analyzing the data from KPIs and KRIs, making some forecasting in terms of what actions need to be employed in terms of improving performance, in terms of taking corrective actions.
Okay, quick question and quick answer required. Adrian, where did it go? Yeah, can KPIs be used 2 times a year?
2 times a year in terms of reviewing them?
Yes.
Yes, they can be reviewed biannually. They can, however, it is recommended to be reviewed quarterly or even more monthly.
Okay. Okay. Another question from Brother Riyad Habadi. That last question was from Brother Ghazi Al-Harabi. This question is from Brother Riyad.
Okay, thank you for the question.
Habadi. Is there any expiration which is called KPMs? These can measure the implementation of KPIs?
Now, I didn't come across such terminology. In terms of terminologies, there are a lot of terminology. That's one of the setbacks and one of the major issues in practice nowadays. People are using different terminologies. KPIs, KRIs, key result area key result indicators, key risk indicators, key performance indicators, measures, metrics. So it's a lot of terminologies that are used. It's important to stick and to define a specific terminology and stick to that terminology while measuring performance of your organization. So it's like an open restaurant menu, as I said before. It's up to each and every professional to pick up what terminology wants to use, but at the same time he needs or she needs to reinforce what is the added value by using a certain type of terminology. As I said, I prefer to use a simpler approach, KPIs for whatever it is measured in terms of performance monitoring and improvement. For everything else we should use metrics. That's it. Yes? Any other questions?
Sorry, Adrian, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
I'm sorry, I think I was on the mute. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that we are actually towards the end of the webinar now, so I would like to conclude it, but any concluding remarks that you would like to give?
Thank you for the opportunity to discuss about this topic, which is one of the most important and meaningful topics in terms of the KPI management framework. This topic will be in more detail debated during the Certified KPI Professional and Practitioner training courses that we are going to run both in Riyadh and in Jeddah in September, but also by the KPI Institute in other parts of the world. For this, definitely we are going to provide with more information as the persons who are willing to attend this kind of more informed and more detailed training courses. Otherwise, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for the interest showed in this topic of how to correctly manage with KPIs, how to correctly document KPIs, establish targets, calculating formulas, and standardizing KPI names.
Well, once again, thank you very much. And I'm just going to take quick 2 minutes, folks, just to show you the MILE community. It's at milecop.net or community.mile.org. You can join it for free, and even there are a number of community of practice areas which are active right now. And currently you're seeing on the screen is integrated performance management, which is being maintained by the smartkpis.com. Mr. Oral Bruden is the subject expert right now, and any questions that you have further, you can always post it. And I think Smart KPIs will be able to answer to you and interact with you on one-on-one on this community. We have invited both Oral and Adrian Bruden to come to Jeddah and Riyadh in the first week of September to conduct a master class on key performance indicators practitioner and professional certifications. So the registration is open on mile.org/KPIs. KPI. Now, this webinar is being recorded, and you can again access it from our community section, whereby you go to our webinar section available at the top, and there are a number of archived webinars which you can access, and you can just check on the YouTube PowerPoint presentation or even the MP3 audio version to download and watch it and listen to it and download the presentation for free. This all is accessible to you guys on Mile Community, community.mile.org or milecop.net. With that, I would like to again thank you, Adrian, on behalf of Mile Medina for your time and sharing this excellent presentation. And thank you especially for taking time to extend the time duration to take answers and make it a more interactive experience for all of us. And thank you to all those who participated in this webinar, and we look forward to remaining engaged with you all. Stay tuned to our website and community for our upcoming webinars and programs, and we'll see you later. Thank you very much. Ramadan Kareem. Khuda Hafiz. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.